Cori Bush is a member of the United States House of Representatives, and she represents the St. Louis area. She is a Democrat. She's been a passionate and outspoken advocate championing the needs of her constituents, and her work is not without pain or controversy. She's currently the subject of a Department of Justice investigation over using campaign funds to pay for security services which were provided by her husband. Now, if you've not paid attention to the political dynamic in the United States, then you may ask, why does she need security? For any informed and engaged observer, it's probably very clear why elected leaders need security. For Bush specifically, she says that she's received numerous death threats, and she says that those threats began before she ever got to Congress. Now, obviously, as she's out doing her work, she's being questioned about the investigation, and she appears to be talking about it openly. As I've watched coverage of this issue in the past few days, I was stunned to listen to Representative Troy Nelhs, who's her colleague, reference Bush's husband or refer to Bush's husband as a thug. He also noted that if she, as in Cori Bush, had not been so loud, maybe she wouldn't need protection. Now, again, his response was completely shocking, and I was stunned. Hi, everyone. This is the PR Whisperer, and I'm a public relations coach. I help leaders tell their stories more effectively and also get the attention that they deserve. So if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel and you'll be notified anytime I post new content. Now, I have so many thoughts about the investigation and also the comments by Cori Bush's colleague. First, I want to be 100% clear that I am not an expert on campaign finance law. I don't know if there are carve-outs that would allow a person to use campaign funds for personal security. I have no idea, so I'm not going to get into the specifics of that. I do believe that all elected leaders need protection, especially in this time of harsh discourse and hyper-partisanship. Axios recently reported that investigations into threats against members of Congress rose again in 2023 after dipping in 2022 from their post-January 6 high. And this was according to data that was released by the U.S. Capitol Police. Apparently, the U.S. Capitol Police opened 8,000 threat assessment cases in 2023. And apparently this data was released not too long ago. The 8,000 threat assessment cases represented an increase of more than 500 over the 2022 numbers. Now, for years, I think elected officials have needed to be cautious about how they move. I think a lot about Gabby Giffords, and she was giving a public event, possibly a campaign event, some years ago, and she was attacked. I also think about Nancy Pelosi's husband, and he was attacked in their own home. There have been other legislators who have experienced violence in the District of Columbia, in the nation's capital. And certainly, if you consider what happened on January 6th, the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, that had to be frightening for people who were inside that building, for elected leaders. It was frightening for many of us as viewers. The truth is, we don't live in, utopia. And I think that our elected leaders need and deserve protection when they're in their districts, but also when they're in the nation's capital. I don't think this should be debatable. I think the question is who pays. And I'm hopeful that there will be some type of legislation that is considered and passed to ensure that our elected leaders are protected. They shouldn't feel under threat for merely doing their job. The other thing that was stunning to me about Representative Nelhs' comments is that he used the word thug to refer to his colleague's husband. And thug is synonymous with the N-word. I am appalled that a person would refer to their colleague's husband this way. I feel like the language is harsh, it's unnecessary. And when you call someone a thug, the very name is triggering something in people who hear it. It's either triggering fear or it could be triggering dangerous. but it's not good. And so when you use words like that, it is a demonstration of how you feel about the person. And it just, again, struck me as incredibly harsh. The other thing that stood out to me is the Representative Nells appeared to suggest that if Bush wasn't so loud, she wouldn't be the subject of death threats. Now, the notion that silence can buy safety, it's a misnomer. There is a belief that if you just keep quiet, no one will bother you, but that is not true. Well, I do think that people who are more vocal and people who have the courage to advocate for what they need and to advocate for what their constituents needs, they're going to face opposition. But I don't believe that silence is the antidote. I also think that the silence that is demanded from Black women is very different from what is expected for other leaders. When I think about the temptation to keep silence, I think a lot about Zora Neale Hurston, who said, if we're silent about our pain, they will harm us and say that we enjoyed it. Now, she didn't use the word harm, but because I'm on YouTube, that's what I'm going to use. So, I think that constituents expect their elected leaders to speak on their behalf, and to be our megaphone. And yet there appears to be a different standard when the person speaking is Black and female, or when the person speaking is championing the needs of their community, perhaps over powerful interests. I'm wondering, if anyone, for people who are listening, if you can find an example of a man being told to keep quiet or that he was too loud, please let me know, because I just think that these kinds of instruction, or this kind of instruction, it's typically given to Black women, it's typically given to women, and it's typically given to people who are championing the need of marginalized groups. The other thing is, when I think about Representative Bush, and not just, what she's facing now, but her career, I want to be clear, it's not that I've followed everything that she has done, because I've not. But one thing that I notice is that from the very first days in office, she has been characterized as a member of the squad. You all will remember that there were 4 progressive-minded members of Congress elected around the time, and they are referred to as the squad. And the designation means different things for different people, but I think it can animate conservatives and possibly liberals in a way that is not helpful, because it suggests that these members of, the quote unquote squad will not fall into line, or that they're going to be obstinate or difficult. I just feel like that label in and of itself, it causes problems. And, I don't know how Representative Bush or the other members of this collective, I don't know how they feel about it. But if you Google her name, there are often references to squad. And I just feel like that's very, very interesting, because it's almost like they are set aside as a different body. So that stood out to me. I think the first step in disrupting a person's path is to change their name, or to characterize them as something that, eventually could be derisive, or is off the bat derisive. So calling her a member of the squad, it's just interesting to me, and it's just something that I've noticed. Finally, when I think about what Representative Bush is going through, or Congresswoman Bush is going through, it's very clear to me that what she and other people like her endure, it can cause a chilling effect on other members of society, to that they won't want to run for elected office, right? And there's a reason that some people don't want to run for elected office, let alone participate in the political process. I think that we should all engage in the political process. We should all vote every opportunity that we have. Certainly, and I'm referring to people who are eligible to vote. So I want to be very clear about that. But I just feel that there is a sense that if you disrupt the status quo, or if you attempt to disrupt the status quo, the powers that be will make an example out of you. And as people have risen to high levels, they seem to be engaged or entangled with investigations. And I think that we should just be mindful of that, because when you see this kind of thing play out, it can cause some people to say, I never want to be a part of that process because I never want to go through anything like that. When we think about the factors that discourage people from running from office, a lot of times we talk about the money that's required to mount a competitive campaign. But I also believe that it has to be some of this side stuff as well. I just think that it's discouraging and it can have a chilling effect. Now, I want to be clear that I think that we should all operate ethically and follow campaign finance laws and other laws. I've said before that I don't think anyone gets a pass. But each time there's a public investigation or each time, something like this happens, it casts a chilling effect on people, possibly dissuading them from participating in the electoral process or running for office. And the only way that we will change our political system is that more people who care and more people who are committed decide to run. But I don't know how they'll do that, or I don't know how people will be inspired to do that when you see this kind of thing playing out. It's not just the money that discourages people, it's the fallout that appears to accompany persons who attempt to disrupt the status quo. In closing, I really wish there was a deeper level of decorum among people who work together in the United States House, the United States Senate, and certainly different state legislatures. Now, this may be idealistic, it may be completely naive. I'll admit that it is idealistic, but it would be nice if there were more decorum and more just basic respect so that a person's family is off limits. Even if you disagree with how the security services were paid for, to call her husband a thug just seems like it seems below the belt, and it also seems characteristic of how Black men are characterized in the United States. I think that we appear to have descended to such a low point, and that's really, really discouraging for the average voters. I've shared in other videos that, I'm an observer of life, and when I give commentary on different issues, I view it from the lens of public relations, offering PR tips, but I also view it from the lens of faith. And as I think about the situation with Representative Bush and, the comments that her colleague made, I'm very clear of the need to pray for our elected leaders. And when I was growing up, I always heard people in church say, pray for the people who lead the nation. And I would think, okay, well, are we praying for their safety? But I think it's all of that. It's like, once someone gets in office, or I think we need to pray that they will do the right thing, pray that they will keep center focus on who matters, and certainly pray for their protection. And so while I've always heard this advice, I feel like it is imperative in the times that we live in. Now, prayer can be active. It's not just getting on your knees and talking to God. It is also talking with your feet. And so I just hope that people, when we see these headlines and we watch these stories and we're incredibly discouraged, that we don't stop there, that we engage in prayer. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel. And again, you'll be notified whenever I post a new content. Thank you for listening.